How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Tuesday, the 9th of July. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's produced the program. Let's get it going. If you're in the St. John's Metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, the topic entirely up to you. 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM. which is 86-26. So I imagine we'll be busy down at the Duke here this afternoon. Beautiful time of year for folks who are fans of the beautiful game. Spain and France, tasty matchup at the Euros in the semi-final. And of course this evening, Canada against the defending World Cup champions, number 1 ranked team in the world, Argentina, at the Copa America semis. So, you know, obviously we're up against it. And as Brian said in the newscast, maybe the end of the road, and it's maybe. I'm not giving Canada much of a chance, to be honest with you. But when you look around at some of the big upsets that have happened in the world of football, there are legitimately some big upsets that we can refer back to in history. Northern Ireland beat Spain in the 1982 World Cup. Then you got Bournemouth, imagine that famous 2-0 win over Manchester United in the FA Cup in 1984. How about Alcorcón beating Real Madrid 4-1 in their championships? The United States beat England in the 1950 World Cup. So there have been examples. Of course, we're going to have to play our level best, and hopefully Argentina takes us for granted and gets caught with their proverbial pants down. But anyway, there you go. And yesterday, we were talking about darts for just a brief second, and the fact that Newfoundland, for the first time in 24 years, won the gold at the championships that just took place in Quebec, won the Nordor Cup. We rhymed off the players, and I guess I must have referred to darts as a sport, and people picked up on it. But in essence, and in fact, in England, the United States, and Ireland, Scotland, Netherlands, Germany, Belgium officially recognize darts as a sport. Why? Because it's an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So obviously not every dart player looks like an athlete, but that's the case. Someone also wanted me to mention who the members of the Canadian Darts Hall of Fame are. No problem. Albert Anstey is in the Hall of Fame. Amy Earle is in the Hall of Fame. Cavell Taylor's in the Hall of Fame representing this province. So away we go. I don't know if you're watching any Wimbledon, but today was the first ever Wimbledon Tennis Championship began. The first official lawn tennis tournament, which included men's singles only. That was in 1877. In 1884, the club added the ladies singles event and the gentlemen's doubles, which was transferred from the Oxford University Lawn Tennis Club. The ladies doubles and mixed doubles events wouldn't be introduced until 1913, expanding the competition. There you go. All right, so yesterday we were told we would find out who would be tagged as the interim Minister of Health and Community Services, and it turns out it's John Hogan. The opposition parties immediately chime in, and I think with all merit in the world. So the minister responsible, of course he's the Liberal member for Windsor Lake, he'll continue his role as the Attorney General, the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. He's also the Government House Leader. He's the Minister responsible for Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Office, and now add to it the Minister of Health and Community Services. That is a lot of heavy lifting. Now, obviously, even in his role as the Minister of Justice and Public Safety, already working on some pretty big files. You know, some bail reform regarding domestic violence or intimate partner violence, whether it be with the ankle bracelets and what have you, and then of course preparing for folks who can't or won't pay their fines, but the creation of some sort of chain gang, and on it goes with much more important matters. So it does beg the question. You know, people will ask, does the Premier not have faith in anyone from the backbench to move into a ministerial portfolio so that whether it be Mr. Hogan or everybody else can take on health community services as a standalone responsibility? Because people will refer to crisis, and sometimes we might overuse that word, but I think it's absolutely pertinent when we talk about healthcare, add housing and what have you. So again, the Minister has a lot of heavy lifting to do. So they've also got on, the Premier said there will be a by-election, pardon me, in Waterford Valley to replace Tom Osborne's seat upon his retirement. So it won't be part of a general election. But if you want to take on this concept, we can do it. Just a couple of interesting things inside that world. So remember when then Premier Paul Davis appointed Judy Manning, an unelected member of the community, to be the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. The uproar was real, and it came fast and furious. I guess that's part and parcel of the reason why things like this possible scenario didn't manifest itself yesterday. Would people of the province had been willing to see Dr. Pat Parfrey made the Minister of Health Community Services? He's the Deputy Minister at the moment in time. He's the co-chair with Sister Elizabeth Davis at the Health Accord, obviously working in the field for decades. People don't necessarily like the concept of unelected members being in cabinet, but is that a better option, possibly, than having someone with carrying all of those responsibilities? And of course, ministers aren't one-man teams or one-woman teams. They have a lot of senior bureaucrats behind them. But really, that puts a lot of pressure on Minister John Hogan of various ministerial portfolios. He'll be chasing around different hats and trying to get up to speed very quickly, because healthcare, boy, oh boy. Something to that. Oh, now just a quick reference to a national, and I would imagine an international story. We talked about intimate partner violence, and Connie Pike from Miles for Smiles comes on once a month to talk about the court docket and the number of people being charged with crimes against children, whether it be physical and or sexual. And this story, which is not new, but I think it's got a new light shone upon it, given an article of actually a first-person essay that was published in the Toronto Star on Sunday by Andrea Robin Skinner. She's the youngest daughter of Nobel Prize-winning, Nobel laureate, short story icon Alice Munro. Dave, do you know this story? It's remarkable. So it began in 1976. She was 9 years old. She was visiting her mother in Ontario for the summer. She spends most of the year in British Columbia with her father. And so her mother, Alice Munro's second husband, her stepfather, apparently would climb into bed with her when Alice was out of the house, and of course was abusing her for years. When it finally came to light to Alice herself, because they went and charged him in 2005, he eventually pled guilty to the charge of indecent assault, but she wrote to her mother with no response, and basically came back to say, well, here's a quote from her herself. I was overwhelmed by her sense of injury to herself. She believed my father had made us keep the secret in order to humiliate her. Then she told me about other children Fremlin had friendships with, emphasizing her own sense that she personally had been betrayed. Did she realize that she was speaking to a victim and that I was her child? If she did, I couldn't feel it. So Miss Munro went on basically to choose her relationship with this evil villain, as opposed to stand up for her daughter, who remained with her her second husband, until his passing. So that's a remarkable story. Anyway, you want to take it on? We can do it. All right. We're still waiting for some reports, anxiously awaiting reports, whether it be the standards and staffing ratios and dementia care and separation of couples in long-term care and personal care homes. We're also still waiting for the review and the report to be released about standards and monitoring and enforcement at the province's emergency shelters, not to mention the fact we're the only province in the country actually paying private landlords to shelter some of the most vulnerable who have nowhere else to go. And, if we're being honest, a lot of the issues that we're facing, healthcare included, housing is at the crux of the matter. So in some cities in the country, some developers say it's basically impossible to build here. Then you add in some of the population growth numbers. So it doesn't make you a bad person to bring that forward. Then we look at skilled trades. And in this province specifically, we do have a shortage on many fronts, especially if we see a real boom and move towards housing. In the city of St. John's, awarding of permits is way up compared to last year. So there will be a real strain and stress on the construction industry. Then you add in some of the mega projects, the wind projects and the possibility for Bay du Nord. Now, it's a good problem to have so many jobs required, and maybe you have to go out of province to staff some, but when you put all those things together, housing really does have a direct relationship, not only with the affordability target, but it does have a direct relationship with poverty, which is one of the most expensive things regarding government expenditures, federally and provincially and municipally over the course of a fiscal year. So trying to get this right inside the world of housing and talk about the major projects. So it kind of came out of nowhere, and it could possibly be a good thing for the Port of Corner Brook. And this is about their Memorandum of Understanding with CWP Global. They talk about the decarbonise supply chains, create jobs, elevate the region's profile. People will have questions inevitably, and tonight you get a chance to ask them and hopefully get them answered. There's a forum beginning at 7 p.m. this evening at the Glen Mill Inn to talk about this potential green hydrogen hub play between the Port of Corner Brook and CWP Global. Russell Bowers had a conversation with that company on the morning show this morning, and it was pretty interesting stuff. And they also refer to the potential concern or issue regarding access to the skilled trades. It's going to be a race to the finish line, because we know World Energy GH2 and Pattern Energy at the Port of Argentia, they're a little further down the road when compared to the Exploits Valley crew and Everwind and the others. So how are we going to see some sort of potential stagger so that if things are approved, whether or not you agree with them, if things are approved, that we actually have the ability to get them built? I'll be curious to hear from you on that front. A couple of ferry notes. I guess there's a sigh of relief being breathed on the tickle between Portugal Cove St. Phillips and Bell Island, back to normal on their 2-ferry run. Same thing with Fogo Island, Change Islands, Farewell, back to the 2-ferry run, although we are anticipating both the Veteran and the Legionnaire to be taken out of service for engine replacements sometime in the near future. All right, a couple of randoms before we get to you. I think we're anticipating a conversation this morning with the Provost and the Vice President Academic, I believe, is Dr. Jennifer Lokash, to talk about the pro-Palestinian encampment or protest that was for some 28 days inside the Arts and Education building. Arts and Administration building, pardon me. So there's some questions remain on that front, but the protesters, they're back. About 70 people gathered yesterday. It remains to be seen exactly how that will be handled. I don't imagine there's much the university can do if the protest remains outside, but apparently some of the protesters were inside. In addition to Dr. Lokash coming on this morning, we certainly welcome a call from, say, Nicholas Kehoe, the Director of External Affairs with Mun's Student Union, and any angle you'd like to take on this, we can do it. I did hear Josh Lupansky on the program once again with Russell Bowers this morning, talking about that the university has very likely looked at some other court rulings that have taken place across the country, notably in the University of Toronto. They got a court injunction from the courts to see that pro-Palestinian encampment to be disbanded. We've seen the stories come from Western, from McGill and other universities across the country, but the pro-Palestinian protesters are back on site. And one thing that I think kind of derails the conversation somewhat is inside those protesters, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're pro-terrorism, you're not pro-Hamas. They're talking about the slaughter of women and children and some of what we've seen reported, even though, as I've said in the past, it's hard to know exactly what is 100% accurate versus conjecture when we see reporting coming from theaters of war, like in Gaza, like in Ukraine, and it's a big issue, but if you want to take it on, we can do it. And speaking of wartime, so the Prime Minister is at the 75th at the NATO summit. It's the 75-year anniversary of that defensive alliance, I'll refer to it as. And of course, there's going to be keen focus on the percentage of GDP spent on defence. And this country has been woefully lacking in many years, up until the most recent federal budget, in and around 1.29% of GDP. The plan by 2029 to 2030 will be some 1.76% of GDP, which is going to fall short, obviously, of the target of a floor of 2%. 23 of the 32 NATO members look like and are expected this year to hit that particular target. And if you want to take it on, we can do it. Let's keep going. This is another federal issue, but we're happy to take on every single provincial issue, as you know, or municipal issue. No issue too small or too big. This is yet another failing regarding the vetting of whether people are going to be appointed to key positions in the federal government and or invited into Parliament. Remember back when Anthony Rhoda's office invited a literal Nazi that was applauded inside Parliament, which was a distinct, woefully inadequate vetting of who that person was. Same thing will be said for the new appointment by the Privy Council office for the new Human Rights Commissioner. He's a fellow named Burju Datani. So apparently he used aliases in the past to make anti-Semitic references on social media. And some of them were pretty extraordinary. So here's a quote coming from the office. The aliases were also not reviewed nor shared with security partners who conduct background checks, a spokesman for the PCO said. After this oversight was discovered, PCO shared the aliases with its security partners who are now completing necessary reviews. Look, inside the office of a Human Rights Commissioner, first Muslim appointed to this position, it's critically important to understand that we have someone in the role that understands the role, has come across with the absence of bias. Because built-in bias or baked-in bias, of course, is not going to lead to adequate or reasonable Human Rights Commission's rulings or findings. So, again, even if there was none of these names were provided, or the information requested from this Mr. Datani was provided to the Privy Council office, you need to be comprehensive in this review. It's a serious matter, to say the very least. And if this person has these so-called baked-in biases based on his own commentary, his own words, written and posted on social media, regardless if they've been deleted and the accounts have been deleted, obviously inappropriate person for this particular role. So sometimes when opposition parties are calling for ministers to be fired and people like Mr. Detani to be dismissed, sometimes it's just the hyperbole of politics. But on this one, they're probably right. You know, the PCO didn't do enough. And they can try to pretend it's really not their fault because they weren't provided the information. Your job is to go get the information, you know, overturn every single rock to see where the truth lies. But anyway, that happened too. All right, a couple of bit more lighthearted ones before we get to you. I don't know if Dave Williams is really following this particular story, but it's Kendrick Lamar going at Drake. Are you following this one, Dave? I'm not really, because I don't really care. So there are a couple of giants inside the world of hip-hop, and they've been going back and forth at each other, which has happened in hip-hop for many years, many years. So it's a lyrical swatting of each other. So there's a fella from Chapel Arm, originally from Chapel Arm in Trinity Bay, population of less than 500 people. His name is Matthew Smith. Apparently, this guy is right in the middle of the internet talking about breaking down the true meanings of the lyrics. He's got millions of followers. His videos are getting tens of millions of hits or views. A guy from Chapel Arm is right in the middle of it. And apparently on a first-name basis with some of the other big giants inside the DJ or the hip-hop media world. On top of that, not that it's really that important story, but I wonder what kind of money he's making at it. Because those sorts of activities on your YouTube channel, when we're talking millions of followers and tens of millions of views, I think Mr. Smith has probably got himself into a very cozy and comfortable place. Dave, let's see if we can find Matthew Smith. I'd love to have a chat with that guy, even though I'm not really sure what the whole battle between Bucko and Bucko is. All right, a couple of quickies. Live Nation and Ticketmaster are already a huge problem and almost solely responsible for the exorbitant amount of the tickets to go see a concert and other performances. So now, apparently, if you have used Ticketmaster, and some 500 million people have done exactly that, they've had a data security incident. They've got some information that has been hacked. Your name, your basic contact info, payment information, such as they're calling encrypted credit or debit card numbers and expiration dates. So this happened on May 23rd. Apparently there was two that were pretty closely linked. There has been a ransom demand of $500 million American, according to some media reports. There are some online sites that you can go to see if your information has been shared, you know, in some dark web corners of that particularly bizarre digital world. But one of the people that was interviewed, and this is Associate Professor of Communications at York University, a fellow named Evan Light, expert in privacy and surveillance technology, he said he's surprised that people's credit card numbers were released, and if people get emails from Ticketmaster saying that they're among those accounts, I'd say cancel your credit card right away. So even when we're really wary of acknowledging an email thinking it might be a scam, if you get one from Ticketmaster saying that your information has been compromised, it's probably an excellent idea to cancel your credit card right away. So, and there's hundreds of millions of people who have used Ticketmaster over the years. And sticking with the music business before we get to your telephone calls here this morning. It was on this date in 1955, 66 years ago. Bill Haley and the Comets went to number one on the U.S. singles chart with Rock Around the Clock. It was the first rock and roll song recording to hit the top of the Billboard's pop chart. Stayed at number one for 8 weeks. It also made it to number one in the UK. And of course, this is about 10 years preceding the Beatles with all of their songs that made it to number one and in the top 100. So 66 years ago today, still one of the largest selling singles of all time. Rock Around the Clock, number one. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Our email address is openline@VOCM.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. We're talking about sometimes the lack of supports in the classroom, Northern Cod, an update on the Canning Bridge, or whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin on line number 5. Dr. Jennifer Lokash, Provo and Vice President Academic Pro Tempore at Memorial University, joins us on the show. Good morning, Dr. Lokash. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you today?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How about you?
Good, thanks.
Let's get right back to the beginning here. So the Students' Union and the protesters say they weren't given adequate time to be told that they'd have to vacate the premises. I read in the news story that a lawyer representing the university told them on Thursday they'd have to leave by Friday. Is that the correct timeline?
Yep, that's absolutely right. On Thursday morning, our lawyer communicated with their lawyer in a letter saying that occupying the Arts and Administration or any other building at the university de facto prevents the owner from using its space, and that the law is clear on that. And then on Friday, the lawyer confirmed that the letter was, in fact, formal notice to the protesters that they are trespassing and will be considered as such.
I've heard reference made by, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but Josh Lepansky with the Faculty Association saying that it may be deemed illegal here, but they say that possibly it's a cherry-picked ruling, say, for instance, from Toronto. The University of Toronto got a court injunction in their provincial courts to vacate their particular tent encampment. So did you get a legal determination here, or simply look at a ruling elsewhere?
Well, we certainly have our lawyers working on this here, and I understand that that's the position that the students have taken, as well as the faculty, that that precedent set in another court in Canada doesn't have applicability here. But it's certainly my understanding that precedents set elsewhere in Canada are relevant and are commonly used in other jurisdictions when the issues of law are the same. And we have a lot of copycat activity happening from protest to protest across the country. That similarity seems pretty evident to me. I also just want to note that we are the only university that currently is dealing with or has been dealing with an occupation of one of our buildings.
So just for clarity, there wasn't any provincial ruling here. A lawyer looked at a court ruling elsewhere to come to the determination that it was indeed illegal.
Like I said, you'd have to talk to the lawyers to get the full, proper legal opinion on that. But we definitely feel like we gave the students plenty of advance warning that this was unacceptable to us. They could no longer continue to live in a building or camp on grounds that are meant for work and study.
There was also made reference that things escalated on Friday. People were sent home due to concerns about harassment and intimidation. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what happened?
Yeah, sure. So, there has been, I would say, a gradual escalation, and certainly last week we saw some of that. The students had planned a series of what they were calling disruptions. So they were sort of traveling around on the inside of the building and shouting and chanting and banging on windows and doors. And, yesterday, in fact, they broke the doorbell outside of the provost's office suite. And, a number of individuals have been filing reports or complaints or noting that they're feeling uncomfortable in the workplace. And, while we absolutely support the right to protest and freedom of expression, we also have a duty to provide a workplace free of harassment and intimidation.
Does that mean that there might be possible action or sanctions taken against some of those students who have been part of those intimidation activities?
Well, I mean, we'll certainly, we have codes of conduct, we have guidelines and principles that the university will use as applicable. We'll have to see what the future behavior looks like.
There's also reference to the St. John's Regional Fire Department doing a health and safety and fire type inspection, and that was part of the decision-making process as well. Can you give us the specifics of what the inspection found?
Yeah, that's right. Last week, the protesting group decided to bring some of their tents in from the tent encampment outside on the grounds into the lobby. So there were a number of tents put up in the Arts and Administration lobby. And the St. John's Regional Fire Department, flagged this, as well as some of the other issues as a result of just, a lot of clutter. There was an awful lot of personal belongings and that sort of thing scattered about in the lobby. So, they noted that we had to address this. We had a legal obligation to do so, and we conveyed that to the students, and even so, the tents were still there in the lobby on Friday. So that was certainly a factor in the decision of what happened on Friday night.
And some of this may indeed be about what we're seeing in Gaza, but specifically they're talking about the so-called BDS list, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions list. Now, apparently this comes from you as well, is that 1/3 of 1% of MUN's investments is in companies on that list. What's the plan?
Yeah, the plan is, the Board of Regents is the body at the university that has oversight of our investments, and they have a fiduciary duty to ensure that we can provide pensions and scholarships and bursaries for students. So the health of those investments is very critical to Memorial's mission, and the Board of Regents has oversight over that. So they are currently looking at the question of divestment. So I can't really comment on what they would decide, but I will say that I think that, divesting, I understand that is a demand that is out there, but the perspective of the university is pretty clearly that to insist on divesting or boycotting actually sort of takes a political position as an institution, which we're really not prepared to do. It's very important that the institution creates a space where all different opinions are, free to circulate and be considered and debated. So, we support that faculty members can, if they wish, choose not to associate with certain organizations. That is their academic freedom, and we see our role here as protecting that. So, we really can't force faculty to align with specific views.
Help me understand what would be the complicating factor here, because we are talking about some $7 million, 1/3 of 1%. I can divest very quickly this afternoon with my financial advisor in things that I see problematic or that are losing value. So where do you think the complication lies, or is it simply about the political alliance or association?
Well, that's certainly part of it. There's a principle of ensuring that academic freedom is alive and well at the university, and that's been the administration's perspective. From an investment point of view, it's complicated because our investments are held in pooled funds and they're managed by investment firms. So, as I said, the Board of Regents, who has oversight over these investments, has committed specifically to looking at the material that the students have provided, and we're reviewing our statements of investment policy and objectives, and we're ensuring that our firms are committed to environmental, social, and governance ratings. But the actual you're plucking out specific investments from pooled funds is, as I understand it, and I'm not a financial person, I understand that to be quite a complicated thing, even if that's assuming they would want to do it in the first place, and I'm not sure that that's where the board will land.
Yeah, not to be an investment expert, but inside a mutual fund pool, it is hard to separate one company out of, say, a group of 10 that you have holdings in. Okay, just in terms of process, is the Board of Regents' decision final, or does the final decision come inside the inner sanctum in Dr. Neil Bose's office?
Oh no, I think the board, the fiduciary duty and oversight of the investments are clearly in the territory of the Board of Regents.
Given what we saw yesterday, some 70 protesters made their way outside of the Arts Administration building. We understand some made their way inside. What's the plan for engaging the protesters from here on out, because it's not over?
So, our position is that we really can't anymore tolerate protesters living in a university building or camping on the grounds, but they are free to protest and to express themselves all day, every day, if they want to. So they can do that, but they can't be damaging property and excessive disruption. We're going to be listening to how people are feeling in the workplace, and we will, like I said, act on that according to our policies and guidelines.
This might be somewhat tangential, but, it's not that long ago there was work interruption. The Faculty Association was on strike, and then we're talking about Munsu wanting seats at the table at the Board of Regents and the whole concept of collegial governance. Do you think that these types of interactions will jeopardise some of the forward momentum?
That's a really good question, Patty. I think the university has been working very hard to improve the relationships with these groups, both faculty association with students. I feel like last year we made some really good headway with Munsu. It does feel like, this is a really challenging part of the relationship, and it's frustrating that the protesters are sort of persistently using inflammatory rhetoric and, putting a lot of what I would consider to be misinformation out there to provoke outrage publicly. And, I don't think that that's really moving us in a good direction. I would prefer for it to look and feel differently. But we are committed to continuing to work with the students. It's amazing what they've accomplished already, and I think they need to be proud of that. They really have pushed us, and we have responded, I would say, more robustly than most, if not all, institutions across the country who have been dealing with encampments and protests. So, I have hope for the future, certainly. We're not giving up on working with this group. And in fact, we have another meeting coming up with them on July the 12th to continue some work on a joint statement that we hope to put out with them.
Can you give me an example of mis or disinformation or inflammatory language that they're using?
Well, actually the joint statement is a good example. And, we sent them a revision of a statement that we've been going back and forth on. The statement commits to the principles of justice and equity, to fostering positive change in the world. It joins calls for a permanent and lasting ceasefire. It recognizes the targeted attacks on educational institutions in the area as an assault on, the very essence of education and academic freedom. These are things that I think are really, we've listened and responded, and we've gone quite far in that statement. And instead, in response, they go out into social media and say that, the university, that they're disgusted with the university, that it's appalling. They call us murderers. They, by name say, so-and-so has, the death of Gazan children on their hands. I mean, it's intended to be provocative and to generate a kind of outrage. And I think it's unfortunate because we really are willing to work with this group, and they have an opportunity to do that with us.
I appreciate your time this morning, Dr. Lokash. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. That's Dr. Jennifer Lokash, Provo, Vice President Academic, Pro Tempore, Memorial University. Let's take a break. When we come back, Terry's there to talk Northern Cod. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Terry, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning.
Patty, I called in the week before last, same issue about the different oaths that day, that day. But anyway, what I'm calling about is the Northern Cod issue, yes. It's the issue that comes from the recent release of the management plan for this year by DFO there a couple of weeks ago. And it's of great concern to me and my son's enterprise and a number of other enterprises that in the last few years have fished codfish in 2J, which is the area off of southern Labrador and southeastern Labrador. In the past, and in fact, for hundreds of years of our history, fishermen from the Highland part of this province have gone to the Labrador to fish codfish, right as far north as Makuvik, which is now in NAPA Division 2G. But DFO in the recent announcement has taken hundreds of years of our history and thrown it literally out the window. In that they, at the first of their announcement, they were saying that fishermen from the Highlands were not even going to be allowed to go down in 2J to fish codfish this year. But unofficially, because they haven't released anything publicly on it, but unofficially, subsequent to their initial announcement, they've backed off a little bit and said, you can go down there to fish, catch your fish in 2J, but it will not come off the 2J quota that has been set aside and reserved for 2J-based fish harvesters. It will come off your 3KL quota. So, even though you're catching your fish down in 2J, they're not going to call it 2J fish. They're just going to take it off of 3KL quota. Now, why is that a concern? It's a concern because that now is going to put even more pressure on the quota for 3KL, because the longliners like my own, who went to the 2J to fish codfish in past years, that did not come off the 3K quota. So the 3K quota, that much fish, given the fact it wasn't coming off the 3KL quota, it enabled the 3KL quota to last a little bit longer. Now they're saying it's got to come off the 3KL quota. It's going to put even more pressure on the quota up here, which is going to shorten the season up here even more.
And, when we spread around this additional 5,000 ton and include the offshore, there's really a pretty limited amount of additional cod quota going to anybody, regardless of the size of their enterprise. Isn't there?
Very, very little of that is going to go to the inshore harvester. That extra 5 ton. Well, it's actually 6 if you consider the quota going to NAFO, the foreign nations, because it's now changed to a commercial fishery. But very little of that is going to the inshore fishers. It's going mostly to the offshore draggers and the indigenous groups of northern Labrador, and also the group known as the Nunavut of southern Labrador.
Yeah, and that's one of the key issues here. I know if I'm a harvester, I'm worried about how much additional tonnage I'm going to be allowed to catch. But when you have the tag change from stewardship to commercial, it brings apart a couple of things. It includes that 5% that goes to NAFO by contractual obligation. It also brings in the offshore, which has traditionally always been part of this blended fishery, but that brings along a concern people voice about, the short soak time of a gill net versus the way that the draggers approach the bottom and what it means for unintentional bycatch, juvenile fish, sponge and sea corp, whatever people want to talk about. So there's a lot to this particular decision, even though it's all based on just 5,000 ton.
Yes, and it's going to set a precedent for future years. There's another concern with offshore draggers, of course, that offshore draggers, the most economical time for an offshore dragger to drag cod is when they aggregate to spawn. During the winter time, winter and into spring on the offshore banks like the Hamilton Bank and the Belle Bank and the Funk Island Bank and the McCovic banks and so on. So that was a major concern as to why we had the demise of our cod fishery back in the late 80s and early 90s, which led to the moratorium. But my main concern right now, for me personally, is this announcement that it's pitting 2J harvesters against 3KL harvesters. And the DFO, in their wisdom, has caused this, and they're trying to create a division here, a division that goes against 200 or 300 years of our history. Our forefathers from the Highlands went to the Labrador, kind of pioneered cod fishery down there, and some of them ended up staying and marrying local people from the Labrador coast, North Coast and South Coast. In fact, a lot of the people who live on the South and Southeast coast of Labrador now, their ancestors came from Bay Roberts, the Powells and the Hurls and the Carbonaire area, so their ancestry comes from the Highland, a vast number of them. Now DFO is going to pit us against them. And I when I called in previously, and the other guy was hosting the program, I'm going to repeat it now. If DFO thinks that my enterprise, and there's one other one who's also made the same commitment, that was being my brother, if they think they're going to stop us from fishing down in 2J this year, in the Openline fall fishery, when the 3K quota is taken, if they're saying it's going to come off 3K quota, then they have got it all wrong. We are not stopping, and if they want to come and get us with their helicopters and their icebreakers and their gun-toting fishery officers, and arrest us with all the media attention that's going to zero in on DFO and bring us into wherever, St. Anthony, somewhere on the Labrador coast, and chain our boats to the wharf. They better have guards there because we got grinders to cut that chain, and we'll be back out on the fishing grounds again in a flash.
Well, I mean, if that's a decision that you and your young fella and anyone else can make, when you talk about pitting one fishery against another, I don't know why it would be you versus other harvesters in other zones, because they didn't make any decisions. They just are trying to possibly abide by what DFO's brought down. So it's DFO. It's probably you guys in the other zone against DFO as opposed to at each other, right?
Well, you could look at it that way, but it's going to. The end result is it's going to pit, because DFO made that announcement, or the federal minister, obviously because of lobbying. There was lobbying to earn or bureaucrats to do that, and politically and from fisheries organizations on the Labrador, I would imagine. So it is going to end up pitting island fishermen and Labrador fishermen against each other, and that's wrong. I mean, we're all part of the same province. We're all, our ground fish license, all of us, our ground fish license is for 2J, 3KL. And now to go drawing lines in the water and taking 200 and 300 years of our history and saying be damned to history based on nothing, only politics and nonsensical rationale, to me is ludicrous. And usually when you have an issue like this in the fishery, you go to your union. Our union happens to be the FFAW. Their hands are kind of tied. They're not going to change this because they don't want to alienate one group of dues-paying members against another group, and they're going to follow a more political, diplomatic route, which is not going to change this. So the only way this is going to change is if you go and say, be damned to you and your silly policy. We're fishing anyway. Come get us. Come and get us.
We'll see what happens. I wish you good luck with it, Terry. Thanks for the call.
And thank you for your time, Patty.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's try to take a break on time. John, you're next to talk about the Canning Bridge. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, John. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Best kind. How about you?
Not too bad, sir. I just wanted to give a call in a little bit on the mad side, I guess, in a way, with the provincial government and their handling of the Canning Bridge. I suppose you could throw them a bouquet of thorns. And how slow they are trying to get anything done. I mean, our bridge out here now, it's been, as you pretty well know, it's been closed for about 18 months or more now. And there has been absolutely nothing done over there by the bridge whatsoever. Now, apparently, and according to their so-called timeline that they have in place, they have... they're going to be putting stone into the waters on both sides, building it in, because apparently they're putting in a Bailey Bridge, and they're going to put the stone in, and then that's going to be done sometime this fall. Then they're going to be waiting until the spring of next year before they start to put the Bailey Bridge in there, because then they're going to come back, and if it's need be, I guess they're going to letting the ground settle or whatnot to see if they need to add any more there to it.
I thought the plan was for the Bailey Bridge to be completed by the end of August. No? No, they haven't even got a stone in the harbour yet. Not one stone. I mean, people are getting frustrated out here, and I mean, I live on this side, on the south side of Marystown, and I'm telling you, like it's after costing me a fortune over the last 2 years extra. I mean, with the additional mileage that I got to put on my vehicles, the additional repairs that I'm after having to do to my vehicles, because the roads are not the greatest. And that bridge was opened in '59, and it had a lifespan of 50 years. I mean, in 2009, according to the lifespan, that bridge should have been replaced just very shortly after that. But we're given in the 2020s before the bridge got closed, and here we are still waiting on getting a bridge
and the Bailey Bridge is not even started. They haven't got one stone thrown in the harbour over yet to build up anything to put a Bailey Bridge on. And, you know, people are getting very, very, very frustrated with all this, with all the added costs, and along with the way everything's gone in the world and the amount of inflation that's after happening over the last years. You know, it's totally unacceptable.
I understand.
And I mean,
I'll get an update because maybe my memory is failing me here this morning, because when they granted that consultant's contract in August last year, I thought I was told at that moment in time directly by the minister that the plan was for the design to take place and all the hydrological considerations, and then it'd be done 6 months after that was completed, which was announced on the 1st of February, if I'm not mistaken. So when I asked directly, what does that mean for timeline? I'm pretty sure, I'm remembering this accurately, that I was told the Bailey Bridge will be in place by the end of August. Now, if that's no longer the timeline, I will absolutely go back to the minister's office, see what kind of information I can get for you.
Well, if they're going to put a Bailey Bridge over there now, we're up now to almost getting towards the middle of July.
Yep.
If they're going to have a Bailey Bridge over there by the middle of August, they're going to be having people working night and day in order to get that harbour filled in, get it all tamped down, right, get it all put on, and then to put the Bailey Bridge on top of that before it gets to the end of August.
You're absolutely right.
They're not going to erect that overnight. And I don't even know, like for a fact, I don't even know if everybody else has been notified and everything's been taken off that bridge. Yeah, I know that our water line is still not taken off that bridge yet.
Well, you're the man living there, so I'm glad you're giving us a real live update from what you're seeing versus what I'm hearing. So this is very helpful for me. Dave, there's always lots of stuff we need to talk to the minister responsible about, and so we're going to invite Minister Abbott on ASAP to give us some sort of timeline update.
Yeah, and something else I'd like to be able to talk about too, if you don't mind. Just give me 1 minute.
No problem.
And that's dealing with this the home care contract. I work in home care, and the contract that they came out with was atrocious to me. I thought it was a real big slap in the face. Nothing to it whatsoever, and it had no basis. To me, in my eyes, they shouldn't have even come back and advised us to even accept it. But I don't know why the government is not involved in there, because ultimately, on the end of the day, the government is the one that's going to be paying the bill. We are not treated as people that's in the healthcare system. We are treated outside. Because we're through agencies, so we're treated outside of that. But we're not even getting, our wages don't even compare to a janitor's wages in the healthcare system.
Yeah, because on one side of their mouth, we're talking about, the potential to age in place and what that might mean for health and safety and dignity and close proximity to family and friends and everything else. But if we don't have home care workers, then that's just a flight of fancy. That can't happen. So which one is it? Are we going to get it right in home care, or are we not?
Well, this is what I'm saying. They're definitely not getting it right. They should be coming back with giving us a decent wage. A lot of people in home care, even myself, right now we are $1.45 away from minimum wage. But we pay union dues. So if you take the 30 cents an hour that we have to pay for our union dues, now we're only $1.15 away from minimum wage. One time we were, home care workers it was a good paying job. It was always around $4 or $5 more than the minimum wage was. But over the last couple of, not very long ago, minimum wage had jumped $3. We didn't jump $3. We jumped like 25 cents maybe, or 15 to 25 cents, and that was it. And here they are coming out with a $3.15 an hour over 4 years. 4 years. That's how long it would take. That would only just barely get us up to barely above $20 an hour. It's totally unacceptable.
I'll pick up on a point you made there, and I think this is a really important one, is inside the group of 22, negotiating with the entities responsible and the government not at the table, it makes no sense. Ultimately, the money for and the regulations and the rules and the hours designed come from the government. So
it does.
How they're not involved makes zero sense to me.
It doesn't make no sense to me either. But I don't know why. They should be one of the ones that they should be at the head of the negotiating table there and listen in and bringing it back and getting stuff done. Are these agencies getting all these higher dollars and giving us menial cents, or what's going on with there?
Don't know.
Right. frustrating, very frustrating.
It sounds like it. So on the home care front, we'll keep that conversation on the front burner, exactly where it belongs. And an update on the bridge, we will try to get one as soon as possible. Hopefully that can happen today. If not, live on the air, if the Minister has time. If someone listening in his office can give us an update about the Bailey Bridge and the construction timeline, we'd love to have it so we can deliver it to the folks in Marystown.
Well, it would be nice to me, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they had over 15 years. Is their department, the Department of Transportation, is that so inadequate that they couldn't have something on the go? It's taken them another 4 or 5 years longer than 15 years after the life expectancy of a bridge, and before they can even do it. I mean, we're looking at now, by the time they actually get that done, gets the bridge in place and gets everything else done, probably 4 or 5 years. Sure, I know they have more than one contractor, but they've done a 13-kilometer bridge, the Confederation Bridge, in 4 years. I mean, you tell me that you can't put in what they're talking about is a 75-meter causeway type bridge that's going to be going back there, and you can't. And it's going to take them 4 or 5 years to do that. So they're like a snail that's stuck on molasses going uphill on the frostiest kind of morning. That's the speed that they're at.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, in the past, like say for instance some of the washouts that we would have seen in Larry or Igor when Bailey bridges need to be constructed, I don't remember them taking that long.
I don't either. It seems like they put them in. They seem like they put them in pretty quick.
Certainly feels like. Now we might be talking much smaller or shorter spans or what have you, but what you described this morning as the lack of work being entertained at this moment in time, even though the consulting work was, I'm pretty sure that contract went out last fall, maybe early fall, like August in the summertime. And if we're still at the point now where just a few rocks have been put in the water as opposed to all of the work that need to be done, then we're well behind. So let's see what we can figure out for you, John.
Well, like I said, there's not even one rock put in that harbour road yet.
Oh,
so
not even one rock.
Set.
Okay.
Not one. Yeah.
Appreciate the time.
Right, Daddy. You have a good day.
Same to you, sir. All the best.
Thank you very much. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Yeah, so Dave, let's invite the Minister on. Or, once again, if you're listening in the Minister's office and simply have some information that you're willing to share via email, even as fundamental as that, we'd welcome that particular conversation, because I'll have to look it up. But I'm pretty sure it was late January, early February, we were told that next stages after design work had been completed, that about 6 months would be the amount of time it takes to actually put the Bailey Bridge in place, the temporary fabric-covered bridge in place. But anyway, we'll see what we can figure out. For those of you in the queue, we appreciate your patience. When we go back, we're talking about the 75th anniversary of NATO, autism in the classroom, the fishery, home care, whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Okay, let's roll here. Let's go to line number 3. Gail, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Morning to you.
How are you today?
Not too bad. How about you?
Fine, thank you. I was looking for someone to work with my grandchild, who's an autistic child, and I have 30 hours a week for the months of July and August, and 25 hours a week from September onwards when school opens. I've gone to the agencies, I've gone to the MHA, I've gone every avenue I can think of, and I'm not having any luck. I've even put up posters. I'm not having any luck getting anyone to accept the position. I was wondering if there's anyone listening to Openline that may be interested in applying for the position.
And I assume you've gone to the Autism Society?
Yes, I have contacted them. Yeah.
And so, to hire someone to take on this role, they must need some sort of background in understanding the spectrum, understanding where your grandchild is on the spectrum, and how to appropriately care for the child?
Somewhat, yes, but I was looking basically for respite.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so no agency was interested in providing any care, given the fact that I think you said you have X number of hours set aside. Does that mean that you've been given approval for that type of support in the home?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why no one's willing to take this on.
Oh, I don't know either. They said that they can't get no one to go to work, basically. One agency told me that they can't get anyone to work more than 20 hours a week, and then they want us to work their own hours and pick their hours. Well, I worked as a personal care attendant and as a home support worker. I didn't pick my hours. I was only happy to get whatever I could.
Yeah, and now some of this might be the fallout from these contract negotiations or collective bargaining, I don't know. So, and not to pry too deeply, but where is the grandchild on the spectrum? And I think I've asked you this in the past, whether or not they're verbal or not, or they're runners or not, or they have a distinct set of needs that need to be adhered to. So just describe the child that might indeed, because some people, they go right to the very end of the spectrum. They think that they've got a real problem child that's going to be extremely difficult to manage or to care for. So just describe your child, your grandchild.
Well, he's not a runner, no. He will do whatever you will ask him, basically. But sometimes he likes to get his own way.
That's not uncommon in the world of children.
No.
Oh, okay. So if someone is listening to the program and looking for some summer work and has the required background and would like to take this on, then they can call us and we can put them in contact with you, Gail. We're happy to try to help. Okay,
and I thank you for your time and understanding.
I appreciate yours. Stay in touch. Let me know how this works out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, I mean, we did read just yesterday some of the updated numbers. Well, not, I guess the numbers are from Friday. The updated unemployment numbers in the country, there was an uptick of 0.2%, which is not great. The economy shed some 1,400 jobs. The story went on to very carefully break down some of the numbers regarding the country's youth. The worst levels of youth employment with people looking for summer jobs since 1998. So there's obviously people out there who are looking to return to probably post-secondary in the fall. If you're one of those young students who has been unable to secure a job, there's an opportunity there for you if you're so inclined. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 2. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello there.
Yes, so I'd like to make a comment on the cod fishery and the reopening of it.
Sure.
My main concern, where I fished on draggers back in the early 80s, my biggest concern right now, if the federal government doesn't implement a law that they do not fish in the months of January, February, and March on the spawning grounds.
Excellent point.
Hello?
Oh, I'm just listening to you. Look, I think that's important, and I can't for the life of me understand why we have ever allowed anybody, inshore or offshore, regardless of the gear, fish on the spawning grounds during the spawn.
Well, that's something that the federal government and DFO have got to do. If not, the inshore fishery and the offshore cod fishery will never return.
You know, it really feels like biting off your nose to spite your face, doesn't it?
Indeed it does, sir. Indeed it does.
Because it makes
All
the fishing.
I'm thinking is that they're trying to suit or ensure that, say, the big fish companies, OSI or whatever they are, or FDI or whoever the big fish companies are, that they get their amount to keep them happy. If you know what I'm saying.
Well, I do. The upside to fishing, the upside quite clearly to fishing during the spawning season on the spawning grounds is are also closely aggregated. So it just makes it easy. Yeah. You don't have to go very far afield because they're all in one spot.
Yeah, and it's not only our Newfoundland draggers are at it, well, the foreign draggers, naturally, they're going to be at it also. As when I was out back in, I think it was 82, the captain of the ship I was on, the large feeder trawler, he asked me to go up to the wheelhouse. That was the first time I ever really see it in my life. You'd almost swear you were in, Toronto, New York, or something like this, with all the lights that were there, and they were all on the spawning grounds.
Okay.
In January, late December, January, February, and March. Guarantee. I couldn't believe it. All the boats that I could see.
I mean, we talk about the fact that the inshore in particular has tried to nurse, if we're just going to talk about Northern Cod, has tried to nurse that stock back to some sort of possibility for some sort of expansion of the fishery, whether it be stewardship or commercial. And here we are going right down the exact same path. So add into it things like seals, add into it the conversation regarding capelin and the spawning grounds during spawning time. There's a lot of nonsense out there.
Yeah. Like I say, the capelin, well, there's a lot of people, I suppose, depend on that for living and whatnot, and same with mackerel or squid or whatever. But you got to be careful, because if they take the capelin away and they take the shrimp away and the squid and all this, well, what are the catfish going to eat?
Yeah, and I don't pretend to have any catch-rate information or anecdote, even much in the way of anecdotal evidence regarding the capelin. We haven't done enough science on it, period, and we know that they rolled over the quota, some 14,500 tonne capelin. And you mentioned mackerel. It's still sort of strange decisions coming here. Mackerel are absolutely a straddle stock. The Americans continue to fish it, and we, of course, have not. You know, I think we're in the year 2 of the so-called moratorium regarding mackerel. Now, you can catch some mackerel for bait, but no commercial fishery.
That's correct. That's correct, sir. But that's my comment. And the federal government don't hop in and haul up their pants, as a fellow would say. Well, you can forget the fishery in the future for anyone.
I think you're right on the money, and I appreciate making time for the show.
Okay, sir. Thank you kindly.
My pleasure. Thanks for the call. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I mean, the conversation has happened many times in the past, and it belongs in the discussion. How can it make sense when we're talking about trying to nurse the stock back to a more healthy state? We're trying to massage northern cod, which has been dearth of an actual recovery plan since the 2nd of July of 1992. There's been no advancement or improvement in the stock since 2016. Yet, we allow spawning season fishery on the spawning grounds. And I think he mentioned the months of January and February, or December and January, whichever those two key ones are, then of course it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Add into it now, apparently, and this is another part of the fishery conversation, is it looks like there's been a drop of any of the challenge or further understanding of the controlling agreements. I just don't get it. So inside the world of the controlling agreements, and I don't even know what role anybody need play any further, whether it be processors, harvesters, and or DFO, I thought for sure that the courts had ruled on this quite clearly. And one of the people that was named in this particular suit, and the challenger, was a Labrador-based fish harvester. I thought the controlling agreement was settled, but apparently not. Let's take a break. When we get back, Paul's in the queue to talk about issue with the prescription renewal. Then lots of time for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Paul, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. My name is Paul. I'm retired military, actually, and the medication I need is a controlled substance. And 2 years ago, we lost our doctor. She moved across town. Stuff happens. And it's been a nightmare ever since to try to, every 3 months, because where it's controlled, it's a different script and whatever else. I registered right away for a new doctor, and actually the doctor that actually come in to replace our doctor when she moved, she took on one of the 7 of us. I have 2 foster children, and I have 3 of my own. And my wife and I both have medical issues. I have a lot, actually. I have 12 autoimmune issues. And this one controlled substance, when I first went on it, was told, no, that's not a controlled substance. But only to find out a year and a half into it was.
It's a narcotic, is it?
Yep. And it's been a nightmare for the past 2 years trying to get a script every 3 months. Like right now, I just actually, I've been on the phone since yesterday because on the 3rd of June, I had phoned Teladoc and I had my regular prescriptions renewed by him, no problem. And I said to the doctor, I said, now I have a controlled substance here that needs to be renewed as well. I said, I have enough for the next month. It's just I need a new script. Can you please fax it to my pharmacy in Spaniards Bay? Right? Yeah. Now, on the 6th of June, I picked up my medications, and sure enough, it was there. But I only found out yesterday he didn't send in the script. The pharmacist renewed it because he knew that I needed it, and he knew that I was actually on this for a while, and just thought the script was coming. It never did. So I just assumed it was gone through. And to find out yesterday, of course, I had enough left for a day and a half, and of course, yesterday's is gone, and now I just took my last 2, and now I'm down to none, and I can't get an appointment nowhere because they tell me I have to see a family doctor to get this renewed. I don't have a family doctor. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the catch-22. And I don't know if this is going to work for you, but just like Teladoc, you can maybe try Medicuro because...
Tried it.
And they won't refill your narcotic?
No. The Medicare said they emailed me back and they said call 811. I called 811.
Yeah.
No, we don't redo it. We don't do that. You got to go to your family doctor. Again.
I wonder, would a walk-in clinic satisfy? I know that you're up against it here and need this to happen quickly.
I've been trying to find one and cannot get one. And actually, right now I'm in Bay Roberts right now. I just moved there from Spaniards Bay. And I just phoned down to Old Perlican, and that's a 45 to 50-minute drive down the North Shore. And of course, that's where I got to. So it's down and up. I was going to be around 2 hours by the time everything said or more. It's unbelievable.
Every
3 months I got to go through this.
Yeah, unfortunately, you might have very limited options beyond a walk-in clinic at this moment in time because, I mean, I understand. You're on the patient connect list, you're trying to get a family doctor, the telemedicine is telling you to go to see a family doctor, but you don't have one. I mean, it's just sort of bogus direction that you're being given. I mean, I know there's some in town, it's even further away than Old Perlican, but I suppose that might be your last type of options, whether it be the NL Health Services walk-in out on Monday Pond Road. I think there's one at the Blackmarsh Family Care Centre.
Yeah, I'm familiar. My doctor was in town, so I worked in town too, right? I'm a federal employee still, and I was in there yesterday. I was at my specialist, and I just thought that my prescription was renewed. And I've asked my specialist before if he could renew it, and he said no, because I was not the prescribing doctor. And he said that's not my purview. So again, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, maybe even just call ahead to make sure that a walk-in clinic family doctor will be willing to renew a narcotic. Because I don't know if they all will or some won't. But just try, for instance, I think you'll get the basic information if you call, whether it be the clinic in Old Perlican or whether it be the one on Monday Pond Road, to just ask the basic information. I've been on this narcotic for X number of years. I had a renewal confusion. And so what did they say?
They said... we don't. There's some that do and some that don't. And actually, I also got a hold of the clinic in Carbonear, and they said, "Well, we can fit you in 15 days." I go, "That's no good to me now, but I'll take it anyway." Right, like.
And I'm not sure, and I'm not going to ask you what this particular prescription is for, but is it?
I'm telling you.
Okay.
I have permanent nerve damage to my right arm and shoulder. They operated on me while I was in the military. They did permanent nerve damage. Now, the military pays for all this. Veterans Affairs pays for all this again. But I can't even go to Veterans Affairs to say to look for a doctor there because I'm retired. You know what I mean? It's, again, a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, but in the world of some will, some won't, it might be worth your while to call a couple more of these clinics in St. John's and ask the very specific question. If it's no, so be it. If it's yes, well, then maybe you're in business. But, and it's just a basic question. So getting fit in 15 days is quite a long wait. Is it manageable or realistic that you can go 2 weeks without the prescription?
No, I can't even go 2 days.
Okay. Well, I wish I could point you in a better direction, but I think you probably got to get on the phone and call 2 or 3 different clinics to ensure that one or the other may indeed be able to put you in front of a doctor who can refill that script.
And this is where you're going to find somewhat ironic. I'm right now in front of a medical clinic here in Bay Roberts. I got to drop off a form now for my mom for the food fishery. She's 89 years old. And all kinds of doctors in there, but I'm not one of their patients.
If someone can come up with a better, more manageable option for you, we'll give you a shout, but I really am kind of at a loss here. I think you're going to have to call 2 or 3 clinics and see if you can get this sorted out. If not, you get back to us. Maybe a listener will send me some sort of direction to steer you in. We're happy to help, if possible.
Yeah. And I mean, I know there's more people going through this, and this is why I come out of this here, because I know I'm not the only one. And I can guarantee you know this as well. So, like I said, I'm going to drop in there now, and I might even ask them in there if they can do something for me. It never hurts to ask.
Absolutely not.
Right? Never hurts to ask. But like I said, I'm on my way down to Old Perlican.
Well, good luck, and let me know how it goes.
Will do. Thanks, Paddy.
Thanks, Paul. All the best, buddy.
Okay. Bye.
Boy, I mean, again, how many times have we heard that story? someone needs whatever the case may be. And many times it's regarding the refilling of a narcotic prescription, and you're told, well, go see your family doctor. Look, I wouldn't be calling 811, or I wouldn't be scrambling around for walking clinics. I wouldn't be wasting my time and spinning my wheels if I had a family doctor. I'd do exactly what I know I have to do. But if you don't have a family doctor, that advice is absolutely useless. Let's go to line number 4. Colin, you're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Daly. How are you this morning?
Best kind. How about you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
I want to talk about... Sorry?
I said that's good.
Good. I want to talk about NATO and the 75th anniversary.
Sure.
NATO was founded after World War II, as you know, in 1949. In the aftermath of the Second World War and the Nazi occupation of Europe, and just the naked aggression that Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich commanded during that war. And NATO was founded in part to provide the collective security of Europe and obviously the United States and Canada as founding members. But now that institution is being threatened, I think, by current political events, especially in the United States.
I don't know if you've seen some recent information because, of course, there's always going to be strategic conversation, but a keen focus in this particular summit in Washington will be on percentage of GDP spending on defence. And some 23 of the 32 members are expected to hit that target this year. We're not one of them. So with the most recent announcement of $7 or $8 billion over the next 5 years, and then $73 billion leading us up to 2030, bring us to 1.76%. But then we see a report coming from the Parliamentary Budget Office, and this is brand new, is that apparently our need to get to that 1.76 threshold, not even all the way to 2, the current plan, so says the PBO, is $2.7 billion short. So the numbers aren't adding up again.
Well, it comes down to there's no political will to reach 2%. If the NATO members collectively agree that 2% is the floor, the minimum that we have to spend on defence as a percentage of GDP, and we're not going to reach that, whose fault is that? That's the fault of the people we elect to represent us in Parliament. There's no political will there, and not only from the Liberals, not from the Conservatives either.
Well, they've been asked directly, and no party leader, period, has said that they are committed to hitting the 2% number. Nobody.
That's right. There's no political will to do that. Now, here the ministers in the current Trudeau government talk about, they deflect on this when this issue is raised, when they're questioned on this by reporters and other people. We're contributing this many billions of dollars to Ukraine. We're doing this, and that's all great. But for the fact that Russia and Putin invaded Ukraine and started a war, an illegal war, and the largest land war in Europe since World War II, we wouldn't have been putting that money into Ukraine, right? We wouldn't have been giving Ukraine all kinds of extra assistance over and above what we've already given them before the war started. We're putting money in there now because of naked aggression of Russia and Vladimir Putin. And to say, we're putting in billions of dollars there, and we're putting in billions of dollars in other areas around the world, yeah, that's great. But we're still not meeting the 2% floor that was set collectively by the NATO members. And it's just, I see no political will by this government or potentially any future government, whether it's the Conservatives or anybody else, to reach that 2%. So if we're not going to put into a minimum of 2% on defense spending as per our GDP, why are we in NATO? We're going to be looked at like we're freeloaders.
Well, we're not alone, though. I think that's worth pointing that out. This is not just one country in the 32 NATO member nations that isn't hitting that commitment. Only 23 are expected to hit it this year.
Yeah, I know. And we're also a member of the G7 too, right? We're one of the wealthier countries. We're a founding member of NATO. We have other international agreements, alliances with other countries outside of NATO. And it gets to our issue of in this country of like procurement, military procurement. You can say, okay, we're going to build a fleet of nuclear-powered subs, and we got to cost that out. And even before to get the design plans put on the drawing board, it gets kicked down the road. And a project that should take 5, 8, 10 years, is going to take 20 or 25 or 30 years. You know, we got left out of the AUKUS agreement with Australia, United States, and the UK. They're building nuclear power subs. We're left out of that. We're left out because we don't put the money on the table. It's quite simple.
The last round of subs we bought were mouldy, old, antiquated British subs.
Yep, diesel electric subs that when they were put out for sea trials in the northeast Atlantic, killed a Canadian sailor and a naval officer. You know.
Mm-hmm. I do.
You know, we had a fire on board a sub. One of the most dangerous scenarios that you can have on a submarine is a fire, and we had a fire on one of those subs. They went out for sea trials, and it was in dry dock, and they did the retrofit on it or whatever they did, and put it out at sea for trials, and it caught fire. I mean, you know, are we a laughing stock of the international community here?
I don't know about that, but, you know, even if we look at our own internal audit of the Canadian military, some 58% prepared, militarily speaking. Then you add in, well, apparently we're some 15,500 troops short of a full roster, a full complement. So there's lots to be questioned here. And regarding NATO member states, it looks like there's some reports, even though it's been denied in some corners, which is why I continue to say it's hard to know exactly what's accurate, exactly what might be misinformation or skewed information. But apparently Polish aircraft have been entering Ukrainian airspace, which is a different, complicated wrinkle on top of what's already a complex issue.
Yeah, it's, you know, wars aren't neatly defined by international borders. Wars and aggression don't follow passports, you know. Putin, he's eyeing Poland, he's eyeing the Baltics, and Ukraine's western flank. If, for any reason, there's an incursion into any of those NATO member states, whether by design or by accident, that could trigger a wider expansion of that war and involve us, NATO, and therefore Canada. So, you know, you look at these wars now that are going on there. This is on the slow boil in Ukraine. What's going on with Russia there? The Russians attacked a children's hospital in Ukraine yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this thing is not just going to stay tightly woven inside Ukraine's borders. There's a great risk here, I think, of this thing spilling over into NATO territory, and NATO getting involved in one way or another, and Canada needs to step up. You look south to the United States, what's going on down there. You have the Republican candidate for president in November, who's committed to pulling the United States out of NATO. He wants to take a sledgehammer to the international order and international institutions, including NATO. He's also said that, erroneously, that, you know, countries like Canada, who don't pay their fair share, according to him, they don't pay. He's not going to commit the United States to defend those countries if Russia or China or anybody else attacks those countries.
Even though there's recent history where other countries came to the aid of the United States.
Well, that's right. September 11th.
Yeah.
It was the first time that the Article 5 under the NATO Charter was invoked. Right? We all came to the collective aid of the United States. You know? I mean, you look at countries like Iceland. Iceland is a member of NATO. Tiny Iceland. You know, with what, 350,000 people population?
Mm-hmm.
They're a member of NATO.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all about collective defense. And NATO is about deterrence. It's not about aggression. It's about sending out a message to these punks like Putin and Xi and Kim Jong-un that, look, here's the line in the sand. You cross it.
That said, some NATO members have hardly been simply wallflowers on the defensive and posturing as a defensive alliance. There's been some military expansionism with some NATO member states. I think that's undeniable, regardless if we're talking from the end of the Second World War or more recent history. But point taken. Anything else before I have to go, Colin?
You know, that's it. We have to reassess, I think, in this country, our international commitments to these organizations like NATO. And the bottom line is, if we're being told by the membership in these organizations that we're not reaching the 2% and we're being dismissive, whether it's liberal government or conservative government, we're not ponying up the money, we're not putting the cash on the table, why are we in these organizations?
Appreciate the time, Colin.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right. I don't know where I am, Dave. Am I breaking here? Break time it is. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let us go. Line number 6. Casey, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. We've spoke a couple times regarding the home care. So I took it upon myself to do an online petition, and I know some of my colleagues have made up some petitions as well. So I just wanted to let callers know if they're in support of everything we're standing for. There are some petitions located everywhere from the Last Chance Irving outside of St. John's, all the way from Whitburn to all 3 gas stations in Goobies and all over Arnold's Cove, Sunnyside, Come By Chance. We're also rallying in areas like Clarenville. I know some are setting some up in other places as well. And I can also send our petition link for online to you to get callers in on it that want to sign.
I think someone sent me a link, but I'll be a monkey's uncle if I can find that inside this jumbled up inbox. So if you resend it, I'll share it to whoever wants it.
I certainly will, and I just want to say my heart goes out to the caller that called in a little while ago, Gail, with the autistic grandson. I've dealt with kids on the spectrum. I've done respite, and it is a hard job to do, but you got to know what you're doing with those kids, and it's a good job, but you got to know what you're doing. And workers that pick and choose their hours, I don't think that's right. And if I might be mistaken, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's in our agreement that we work every third weekend and we don't get to really pick and choose. But I don't know.
I guess some of the power does return to the worker sometimes if we're dealing with the home care support worker shortage, just like we are in many disciplines in healthcare, then all of a sudden the power goes back to the employee and they can just pick and choose. They'll say, well, I'm not working next weekend. I already told you I'm not working next weekend. And the company or the agency says, well, we're letting you go. You just move to the next agency. And I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but that's some of the power that people think they have. So anyway.
Yeah, that's right. But again, my heart goes out to her, and I wish there was something I could do to help her, but I hope she finds the right worker for her grandson.
Me too. And I'll add to it. There was a caller a few weeks ago, an older lady, I'm pretty sure she was in Arnold's Cove, and her home care worker was going on holidays, and the agency didn't have anyone to backfill, and so she was left in a lurch, which, the automatic question is, how can that possibly be? And then there's a caller coming up, I don't know the entire story, but they lost their caregiver because the person fell sick, and then, of course, they're left in a lurch. So at the same time, when the federal government, the provincial government, and the seniors advocate, and not to include Susan Walsh, because she has no control over this at all, but if we're talking about getting it right in home care, getting it right in aging in place, getting it right in long-term care, if we don't have the personal care attendants, if we don't have the home care workers, then we're just pretending we're making some advancements when in fact we're going backwards.
For sure. And I know myself, I've been in a situation, I don't know the exact situation with that particular client. I worked in another area, and I'm a fairly tattooed woman. I was sent to a home that a woman was very Christian, and as soon as she was perfect with me until I took my sweater off. As soon as I took my sweater off, she was very cross with me, and she was very rude. I finished out my shift for the day, and I went to the agency the next morning, and I said, listen, I'm not going to stay in a home where I'm not welcomed and whatnot, and I left. So sometimes you get a client that is very particular about the worker they have. So sometimes the client is a bit picky, right? So that could have been the situation. I don't know 100%.
Well, there's a lot of that on the go, and I would imagine those types of stories are going to become even more frequent because there's been a real significant rebirth of the ink tattoos are as common now as they were back in the 50s and 60s when they were all the rage. And we've gone from just people with anchors or mom or dad or across their fingers hash or weed. People got full sleeves who are full-time professionals with doctorates in one thing or another. So it's been really popular. People just need to get used to seeing it, because tattoo doesn't mean that you're going to rob the person you're attending to. I mean, tattoo is just a personal choice.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm fairly tattooed myself, and I've worked with everyone ranging from very elderly to young kids, and no one has had any issues with it.
Yeah, well, I personally don't. Now, and I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole judgment game of tattooed or pierced or what have you. And of course, when people need to make their own decisions regarding what may indeed be deemed to be problematic ink, whether it be the symbols that you choose or whether or not you want to put them on your face, and that's up to you. Couldn't care less. If people want to put a tattoo on their face, so be it. But I suppose we all ask ourselves the same question. When I present myself for employment, do I think that my the way I keep my hair, the clothes I wear, where I put the ink, where I put the piercing. I mean, again, I have no problem with any of it, but you know full well, while some of the status quo about the judging the book by its cover is still part and parcel of human nature, even though patently unfair many times, that's just questions we ask ourselves, and make your own decisions.
But it should not affect the way I do my job.
Of course not.
And it shouldn't affect the quality of work that I put out.
No, I'm certainly not trying to suggest it does, and hopefully it didn't come across that way.
No, and just that's the way some people think. Oh, yeah. And that was the way that this particular client that I dealt with was thinking at the time.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know the situation that client was in or whatnot. Sometimes it's just a client-worker incompatibility.
Yeah, incompatible based on tattoo is a little bit different than incompatible based on skills and background and reputation and or testimonials or whatever the right phrase is. I appreciate you making time, Casey. Send me that email with that link.
Will do. Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Yeah, of course, look, some people are very judgmental. Some people, couldn't care less, right? To each their own. But I do think that there is decision-making conversations we all have with ourselves about how we are presented. You know, and again, that's not an effort to put be judging the book by the cover. You've seen some examples. There's a vast difference between having a full sleeve of tattoos, and some are pretty cool, versus you'll see some people with extensive tattooing, for instance, on their face, and with some symbols and or numbers that may be deemed to be offensive or irresponsible or something or other, and people do as they see fit. But of course, everything we do in regards to how we present ourselves has a potential complication. And everyone will do as they see fit, I suppose. Let's take a break. When we come back, Barry's in the queue to talk Northern Cod. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Barry, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning.
Anyway, I was prompted to call in from the fisherman from Labrador and who identified some problems that he saw with the Labrador and island fisheries. And I'd like to call in and talk about a solution, if you like, to not only that problem, but a solution of how we might better manage the fishery.
I like talking solutions. Go ahead.
Anyway, my partner and I have been researching some fishery policy and looking at what's a better way of harvesting the fishery. And we're in the process of preparing a paper or an article, which will be out tomorrow or next day, and I can send you a copy when I do. But basically, we suggest to DFO, and have suggested to DFO, that they start managing the fishing and not the catching. That we don't use quotas at all to manage, but rather use the various inputs to fishing, like number of hooks, number of pots, the number of trawlers, the number of harvesters that can fish in a given area. And those restrictions would, we feel, enable a sustainable harvest.
Walk us down through that a little bit more. Just
okay. It's a bit of a shift in thinking.
It is,
but basically, when the first article I ever wrote on was back in 2013, And I talked about it as being a lobster model. And let's take a look at what happened to lobster on the northeast coast in this past season. They had record catches. And why? Because there was no quota on the catch. They still used the same number of fishermen went fishing, same number of lobster pots were used, but they got, I think, something like almost twice as much lobster as before. And the reason they got more lobster is because there was more lobster there. They didn't have to wait until DFO said, "Oh, there's a lot more lobster on the northeast coast, therefore we can allow a bigger quota." We don't have a quota, and as a result, we have a lobster fishery now that has been successful for nearly 100 years. Just historical fact, we had a moratorium on lobster in 1923 to 27. And the rules that we use now for harvesting lobster, in principle at least, haven't changed much in that 100 years. And we've had successful fishery of lobster since that time, and without a quota. So we have looked at all the various species that we have and conclude that with most of them, we can do the same thing and use the same kind of thinking by regulating the fishing and not the quota.
I know the answer to this question pretty much, but for folks who are kind of unfamiliar with the different species and how they're managed, whether we talk about total allowable catch and the tonnage and the timing of the seasons, what have you, how is lobster actually structured?
Well, you mean the fishing?
Yeah.
The understanding that I have of it I fished lobster in Newfoundland many, many years ago, but basically then you were only allowed to use lobster pot in order to catch it, and you could only fish it during a given season. The lobster trap is constructed so that the small ones can all escape, and you were required to throw back the egg-bearing lobsters. Those regulations were sufficient then, and as far as I know, it's not changed drastically since then. That is sufficient to keep the harvest sustainable and the lobster stock healthy.
Right. And then, of course, when we talk about the sale of or the marketing of, there's interesting stories about the amount of money that's given to the harvester versus when the lobster actually gets sold and what price points it's able to gain. And I remember a story. I always shag up this guy about Rick Crane out in Cox's Cove. He spent $500,000 on his own money for lobster holding tanks, so he has more control of his fate.
That's right. So, and that's part of just allowing competition at the provincial level, because I call in really to talk about what the federal regulations are.
Okay, sure.
But there's a good example of the change now in thinking on the part of the provincial government and by the FAW to allow competition in the processing sector, and just where that's going to go. But it's certainly a positive turn of events.
Yeah, which, if you listen to the ASP or the FFAW, that whole concept of competition and what they refer to free enterprise, both of the entities at the top said they've achieved it, especially when we talk about lobster and shrimp and halibut. Harvesters, not so much. I don't think they've accepted that that's been achieved as it was, articulated by John Abbott or others, or John Effort, pardon me.
I don't think the provincial government has removed has made competition, a free competition. We have in Canada a Competition Act which applies to most products that we eat, and other things as well, of course. But in the and so any system that we come up with which waives the Competition Act would not fulfill the promise to allow competition. If you're going to have competition, then the Competition Act of Canada has to be in place and be the law that we have to follow.
Yeah.
And until that happens, we don't have competition.
Well, there's a lot of gray inside that world. Competition doesn't have a very clear-cut definition, to be honest. I mean, because if we talk about the different levels or severity of or the activity inside one competitive industry or another, I mean, I can think of a couple off the top of my head. 80% of the food retail market is controlled by 5 outlets. The telecom companies are the good example. The Competition Bureau of Canada has quite clearly spoke to this particular issue And it seems to me some of the legislation be damned. It'll be up to regulators like the CRTC and or government itself to decide what competition actually sounds like.
Okay. We're as usual. I'm easily distracted, so you've got me off, or we've got each other off my original reason for calling, which was how do we catch fish?
Some of that's my fault. I apologize. I have an active
No, that's okay. I was led astray as well, and I went along with you. Yeah, okay. So the way we would manage, say, codfish, would be that there would be identified harvesters. And we sort of know, we can identify those people. There's about 6,000 to 9,000 of them, and they would be the only ones that would be able to fish commercially. They would be able to use certain types of gear, and the closer it was to their home port, the more they would have more access, more right to use. They could have a certain number of hooks. If they were using long lines, each harvester would use a certain number of hooks. If they were fishing crab, each fisherman would have a certain number of traps. If they were fishing with gill nets, each person would be allowed a certain number of gill nets in a certain zone for a certain season. And those regulations, just as with lobster, would be sufficient to manage the overfishing, to make sure there was never any more overfishing. And if we don't have overfishing, then we would have a sustainable fishery.
I think that's a nice summary point, because it's hard to argue that one.
Okay.
Now, I can absolutely take that summary point and run with it and shag the both of us up again if you want.
Okay, go for it.
No, I'm only fooling around.
Okay.
Anyway, I appreciate the time, Barry. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think as I said, it was the guy from Labrador who pointed out, who looked at the problems that has created. And when I looked at it, I said, that's because everything is managed by a certain tonnage that each fisherman is able to have. He was arguing about the tonnage. Under an input-based managed system, which is what we propose, each fisherman would be allowed a certain amount of rights to fish. And that might be, let's suppose he said he had a long liner, so that means he has a long liner. If he had 5 crew and they had, say, 1,200 hooks per person, then they could use 6,000 hooks every day during the season. If someone came up from Newfoundland and fished on the same ground with a similar-sized crew, they could use 6,000 hooks. But neither one would be taking from the other. Would be no conflict between whether you were from Newfoundland or whether you were from Labrador.
Right, and this point will not derail the point that you're making here, but Terry's the guy you're referring to, and Terry actually fishes out of Lassie. He made reference to the impact on the Labrador harvest, but your point about sustainable fishery is not, isn't derailed or tainted by the fact that Terry actually fishes out of Lassie, but because I completely understand where you're coming from. Barry, go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead. No, I was just going to agree with you, that's all.
I appreciate the time. I've got to get to the news break, but stay in touch.
Okay, I will send you my article when we get it ready tomorrow or next day.
I look forward to it.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Barry. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Dana's got a story. The caregiver fell sick. What happened to the gentleman who's using that caregiver? We'll find out. And then we're going to talk about wait times. And then get a reaction to some of the comments from Dr. Jennifer Lokash, the VP Academic and the Provost at Memorial University, from Nicholas Kehoe. That's regarding the pro-Palestinian protest that was disbanded on Friday evening. And of course, 3 students charged with trespassing, but they were back at it yesterday, some 70 strong. We'll hear from Nicholas as well right after this. Don't go away.
Your voice in Newfoundland and Labrador's biggest conversation.
If you want to know what's happening in your province, tune in to Openline every day.
Have your say weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. on Openline with Paddy Daly on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Dana, you're on the air.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Dana.
I usually talk about Maxim's Camp and Line stuff most of the time, but I got something different to talk about today.
Okay.
I just want to talk about the long-term care places, because Paddy, I find that people should be praised, and I know the health system sucks sometimes, but I tell you, they should be praised on what they does in these places too, because it's unbelievable the care that I've got. They're number one, from the cleaning people to the laundry to the kitchen to the paramedics to the nurses to doctors. It's unbelievable. I mean, when I had to come to long-term care, I didn't know what to expect. Because I had to go to Cornerbrook first, because to wait for a room in Fort Saunders. And I was scared because I didn't know no one, being blind. I'd just like to say thank you to all the staff at the Western Moore Long-Term Care on the 4th floor and all the staff at Fort Saunders Long-Term Care, because they're unbelievable. And I'm willing to take care of everybody.
Dana, you were living independently. How did you end up in long-term care?
Well, I had a stroke 10 years ago. I went blind when I was 11, and 10 years ago I had a bad stroke. And my mom was taking care of me as my own care. And she took sick a month or 5 weeks ago with a heart attack. And thank God she's still alive at home. And she can't take care of me no more. And I couldn't get a home care worker, so I had no choice to come to long-term care.
Well, I'm certainly pleased to hear that you're happy with it and the way you're treated. That's the good news.
Oh, it was unbelievable, Patty. The people get scared of coming there. They shouldn't, because they take care of you like unbelievable. And I said, I'd just like to say thank you to every one of them.
Well, I'm sure they appreciate the bouquet, because more often than not, what we hear regarding healthcare is complaints, but there's lots of good people working in the system, that's for sure.
It's unbelievable. As soon as you push the button, they come running, and they're unbelievable, Patty. And like I said, I'm planning on going back to Cornerbrook, because where there's more people there like my age and stuff like that. But I mean, the staff in Fort Saunders, they're like family to me. And I also like to say a very thank you to all the friends and family that have always called to check on me. That's what keeps me so strong, Patty, is the friends support and family support I got. They're number one in my books.
Well, it's all good news, because, you know, there is a lot of the unknowns when you're going to leave your home and the setup that you're familiar with to move into a long-term care facility, not knowing how you're going to feel, how you're going to be treated, whether or not you're going to be able to make some friends or whatever the case may be. So this is good. Dana, are you planning on going back to the Max Sims camp as well, or are you able to?
Yeah, not this summer, because I'm trying to get set where I'm going to be living. And like I said, when I got to Cornerbrook, I didn't know what to expect, being crippled and blind. And when I got there, my God, Patty, had to open their arms and welcome me, right? And when I left to come back to Fort Saunders, the two of the nurses the night before when they went and bought me supper. I mean, how nice you getting that? And they said they can't wait for me to come back, right?
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Unbelievable.
That's good news, Dana. I hope you're doing well. I appreciate your time.
And thanks to all the people who takes care of you.
Righto. Stay in touch, Dana. Appreciate your time.
Everybody, God bless. Thanks for your time.
Take good care.
And for the loves everybody out there.
Good stuff. Stay in touch, Dana.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to one of the program support workers at the St. John Status of Women Council. That's Emma Sauer. Good morning, Emma. You're on the air.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Patty.
My pleasure. How do I properly pronounce your surname?
My surname is Sauer.
Sauer.
Like the flavor.
Yeah, like Gene Sauer, professional golfer. Got it.
All right. Thanks for clarifying that.
No problem. What's on your mind this morning?
This morning, I just wanted to call in to let folks know that the Women's Center has a ton of summer programming going on. I'm most excited that we're bringing back Connect in Care, which is a program that is designed to support women and gender diverse people who have experienced or are currently experiencing intimate partner violence. The program provides information on a ton of different topics that relate to intimate partner violence and the way that impacts folks' lives. And we just hope to reach as many women and gender diverse people as possible so they can avail weekly information sharing, peer support, feel more connected and supported around this highly stigmatized topic. And one of the things we're really excited about with this program is that we are offering child minding for it, which is a huge barrier for some folks to access services. So child minding is available, and we also offer transportation to and from the Women's Center within the St. John's area.
That's pretty helpful. So when you talk about information sharing regarding intimate partner violence or domestic violence, is it simply like how to access an emergency shelter like Irish Kirby House, or what are we talking about?
So that kind of information is available anytime anyone calls the Women's Center.
Sure.
We have those supports available, but Connect and Care is more so designed as a way to educate folks about the different types of ways abuse show up. And then the peer support piece is, it's not so much a lecture as like a conversation. So I'm one of the facilitators, and my role is basically to introduce topics. For example, we have one tonight. The topic is exploring intimate partner violence, so kind of getting into the different forms of abuse. And then throughout, there are open-ended questions, and the folks who come are able to share as much or as little as they'd like, keeping in mind that we are trying to create a safer space for everyone there. And it's also a way for folks to meet each other because it is such a stigmatized topic. Sometimes it's challenging to let the folks in our lives know what's going on, and so we're entering a space where everyone there has experienced something relating to intimate partner violence. There's no judgment, and it's just a great way for folks to connect with each other and get that peer support.
And the child minding and transportation obviously will make it a lot more accessible, a lot easier for folks to avail of the program. What other programs do you have this summer?
The other programs that we have this summer are, we have some seasonal programming going on. So one of them is Exhale, and that is a mindfulness program that's going to start this Monday, the 15th. It's going to run throughout the entire summer, Monday 12 to 1. And we have some amazing facilitators in St. John's who have volunteered their time to help create this program. We've got yoga classes. We have a visit over to Evolution Martial Arts coming up for a self-defense class. One of the days we're just going to Bannerman Park for a lovely day in the sun, so there's a huge variety there. We also have something called Word After Word, and that is a journaling program for healing and relaxation. And that's going to be run by a wonderful gender studies master's student that's interning with us for the summer. And again, that's a place for women and gender diverse folks to come. And you're welcome to, share if you'd like to share what you're journaling about. If not, it's just a great way to build some connections. And then we also have our core programming going on throughout the summer. So one of our really exciting programs, all of our programs I think are exciting, but we offer something called Right Here, Right Now counseling twice a week. And that's every Tuesday and Wednesday. It is completely free, drop-in counseling, so no appointment needed. If you need to talk, you can come on in to the Women's Center, 170 Cashin Avenue Extension. We also offer it over the phone or Zoom to try and make it more accessible for folks. And that whole process usually takes about 90 minutes. You come in, you are connected with an intake worker, and the intake worker's role is to spend about 15 minutes chatting. We try and narrow down the focus of your session because we don't take notes. It's not a clinical setting. And that way, when you see the counselor, you kind of have what you're going to talk about with them at the forefront of your mind. And we just find that way participants are able to get the most out of their counseling session. But just because it's one topic at a time doesn't mean you can only come once. Folks can avail the service as many times as they'd like to.
I appreciate you making time for the show. And anything else you'd like to add before I have to take a break, Emma?
I'm just grateful that you had me on here, and I hope to see more folks coming down to the Women's Center. It's a wonderful part of the community, and we're always so excited to meet new people. And so hopefully some folks listening will come on in or give us a call and ask some questions. I
appreciate the time, Emma. Keep up the good work and good luck with these programs over the summer.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Emma Sowers, a program support worker with the St. John's Status Women Council. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Say good morning to the Executive Director for External Affairs at Memorial University Students' Union. That's Nicholas Keogh. Nicholas, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Happy to have you on the program. Before we get into some of the happenings over the past few days, what's the presence of the protesters today? Where are you? What are you doing?
So there's a few of us right now in the lobby of the Arts and Admin building, and we're just peacefully protesting as usual.
So if you say you're peacefully protesting, how do you react to Dr. Lokash's comments that last Friday staff were sent home because of the harassment and the intimidation and the banging on doors and the doorbell is broken? So if it's peaceful, how do any of those things happen? Or are you denying that they did happen?
I find it very interesting that she would say that when the RNC specifically said, I believe to the Independent in an article, that there was no safety concern whatsoever. there was definitely noise, because in most protests there is a level of disruption, and so there was noise, and then the staff was sent home because of that noise. Jennifer Lokash did not leave the building until after the end of the workday, so she did not leave early. So I do not think that there was any intimidation or harassment. I think that that's absolutely not true.
But no, comments come from the RNC for only when the RNC were on site, as opposed to during the course of the day. I mean, that's fair to say, isn't it? Because the RNC aren't going to make a statement of there was nothing to be seen all day long versus when we were on site and what we saw. And of course, when we talk about the numbers of protesters that were being, disbanded or dealt with at that moment in time, there was a pretty significant presence of security guards and law enforcement itself. So, there's an essence of some heavy-handedness here, but the RNC only talked about what they saw, not what they didn't see, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But we also have seen faculty. Munfa has come out and agreed with us. We've seen faculty do teach-ins. We've seen administrators do teach-ins and be here and give us food. We've seen, it's been very clear, and it's been reported in other media as well, that it has been extremely peaceful, not harassing anyone, not excluding anyone, not intimidating anyone. And that's a really odd claim, I think, that the administration likes to make to justify the use of police force, which really wasn't necessary. And I think we've seen from the reaction from the public that it really wasn't necessary, and it was quite alarming that this happened.
I can't speak for the Faculty Association, obviously, but it seems to me from what I heard is that they're basically challenging the university's assertion that there was a legal requirement to disband the protesters, leaning on some court rulings that came, for instance, with the University of Toronto in Ontario Supreme Court or Superior Court versus legal rulings that have been made here. I think that's part of their issue and what it might mean for contravening their collective bargaining as opposed to taking a stance on your position. Is that a fair characterization?
I wouldn't say so. I believe that they also said that we were not being intimidating and that there were faculty that participated in the protest and were peaceful, specifically within teach-ins. There were several faculty that did teach-ins, that participated, that sat down with us, that just were around us in this protest, and we were not excluding anyone, according to these faculty, according to the students, according to the media. So really, it seems as though it's only the administrators that are disagreeing with this.
Would adherence to the BDS list would it include any disruption of work or study as opposed to sticking with the point that you're protesting on? And of course, we have to include it's not only the BDS list and the divestment issue, and even if the university says it's 1/3 of 1%, around $7 million is all we're talking about here on the list that's been identified by your organization. And yes, include what's happening to women and children and the children's hospital that was bombed yesterday. We can talk about all that, but does that include, or should it include, any disruption of work or study?
The BDS list?
Well, the presence of the protesters, should it impact work and study? Because that's not necessarily who you're focused in on. That would be your fellow students and people who have nothing to do with decision making.
Yeah, so students were not disrupted. There was no issue there. So with disruption in general, a protest is supposed to be disruptive, and I think that that's exactly what we did, and it did work in the way that it wanted to work. We do understand that it is a workplace, but disruption is necessary, especially when admin has been absolutely ignoring what we've been saying for weeks. We've been there for 6.5 weeks. It would have been 7 weeks if we were allowed to continue, and we have not been listened to.
If the university says that the consideration is currently in front of the Board of Regents, who have a fiduciary duty by law on these particular issues of divestment and investment and the monitoring of. So if it's in the hands of the Board of Regents now, does that give the protesters, the pro-Palestinian group, reason for pause, or does it not matter? Because unless there's a decision coming from the board, then of course it can't be the sole responsibility of Neil Bowes or Jennifer Lokash or anyone else that month, because I guess in the world of fiduciary duty, that's where the decision would lie.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that we have not seen sufficient or acceptable communication from Neil Bowes or Jennifer Lokash on this issue, or Glenn Barnes, the chair of the Board of Regents. And so, as much as it is the Board of Regents' responsibility, we would not stop the protest before this decision is made by the Board of Regents, because it is very important and it could be made earlier. We also have just had many issues with the treatment of students from administration. And we think that the use of police in this situation, I think, is really ridiculous, because if the university is confident in the application of the U of T decision in this case, then why didn't they seek their own injunction in Newfoundland and Labrador and show in court that they were right to do so? They didn't want to do that because they don't have a legal basis for this. And we've seen from several lawyers, they've told us and they've said in the media that this was not appropriate to do at all. This was not something that the university should have done, and they didn't have the legal basis to do so.
Which we asked Dr. Lokash directly on that particular issue this morning. You know, a legal opinion from a lawyer is not a court ruling, and that's the concern being broached, is that whether or not they're simply leaning on injunctions that we've seen granted by courts outside of this province. And that doesn't mean, you know, because in the world of precedent setting, there's different ways to interpret all sorts of rules and guidelines and laws, and that's why we actually have to go to courts to get opinions offered and formal court rulings. You know, precedent is set by the Supreme Court of Canada, not by provincial superior courts.
Absolutely, and that's what we're really concerned about, is that it seems as though Munn administration is picking and choosing what laws and what court rulings to apply to something that is in a different province, taking things from Ontario but not taking things from Quebec with the McGill ruling. It is really, really concerning that they would do this and act as though this is legally binding, which it's not.
Fair enough, Nicholas. Nicholas, anything else before I take another call here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I really wanted to make sure that people know is that Lokash claimed that students had lots of notice. She said in the media several times that students had a lot of notice before the police were involved. This is untrue. This is not true. I was there. There were 7 students inside. We received a trespassing notice at 9:57 p.m., and by 10:01 p.m. the RNC was there. That's the opposite of what they said in the Gazette and what they've been saying in the media, that the RNC was only called after 3 students refused to leave. There were 7 students there. No one had refused to leave whatsoever. And then 30 minutes later, 4 students left and 3 students refused to leave. The RNC had already been there for almost a half an hour by the time that happened. So I do want to really recognize the fact that there are untruths that are happening from the president's office, from Jennifer Lokash's office. We're not seeing the full picture when we're just hearing their story.
For clarity, were you not told on Thursday that that was going to happen on Friday?
No, we were not told. We were not given a timeline. We were asked to leave. We were not given a timeline. We were not given a trespassing order. We were not told that the police would be involved. We were not told that we would be removed.
I appreciate the time, Nicholas. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye. Nicholas Keogh, ED for External Affairs at Munsu. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're running the rock, raising money and awareness for Make-A-Wish Canada. Liz wants to tell us about some stuff that got stolen. What? We'll find out. And then plenty of time for you. Don't go away.
The Tim Power Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Liz, you're on the air.
Thank you. How are you today?
Doing okay. How about you?
Good. I just want to talk about that I had a yard sale on July the 6th in the Cornerbrook area, and a number of items got stolen. So my purpose of going online is that I want to send a message to these people that stole a number of items, and they got caught on my video cam here. And I want my items to be returned. If they just want to drop it off and leave it in my driveway, and that's fine. I'll be good with that. Other than that, if they don't return it, I'm bringing my proof to the RCMP.
And how much time are you giving them to return the items before you go to the police?
They got till, well, I had a yard sale on Saturday, so they have till Saturday. And
Saturday it is.
I want my items back in the condition that it was when they stole it.
Listen, fair enough for taking a stance here. So I assume by your comments here that you have very clear pictures of their face.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And their vehicle.
Good for you.
Yes, so that's a message for them.
If you're listening out and around Corner Brook and you know that some of your buddies were involved with stealing these items that were said pending a yard sale coming up on Saturday, you give them fair warning. Bring them back or the RCMP will be knocking on your door.
Thank you very much. You have a good day.
You too, Liz. Good luck with it.
Bye-bye.
There you go. Bye-bye. There you go. It's a pretty firm stance. I like it. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the CEO of Make-A-Wish Canada. That's Megan Stovall-McKnight. Good morning, Megan. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty. This is Megan calling in from Deer Lake, where we're out with the crew of the HMCS St. John's on our annual Run the Rock fundraiser. This is our 29th year, and we are hoping to make it a record-breaking year, raising funds for Wish kids and families all across the province.
Yeah, and of course, there's 16 proud members of HMCS St. John's participating in this rally-style or relay-style race across, not a race, I guess, a run across the island, some 900 kilometres. You talk about breaking records. Last year, the record was established, and I believe the number is $132,000, so probably a long way to go, and hopefully you get there.
Yes, it was an incredible year last year, and I'm thrilled to say we've already raised $80,000 this year. We're only 5 days in. So we're, as you know, we're on the western side of the province. We still got to go through central and over to the east. And the reality is we've still got 23 kids across the province right now waiting for a wish. So we need everyone's help. Just on the weekend, we were in Stephenville and we met 3-year-old wish kid Lennon, and she is battling cancer. But the crew met with her on the weekend and welcomed her into our Make-A-Wish program. She wants to see animals so her wish is to go to the San Diego Zoo, and we've got that wish in planning right now.
It's fantastic stuff, and of course the average cost of a wish is around $10,000, so we've got 8 wishes or thereabouts granted through the monies already raised 5 days in. I'm pleasantly surprised with the fundraising total. Give folks some other idea about some wishes that have been granted or wishes that are in the hopper, because for children with some dire prognosis, maybe one of the last times for the family to be together, put a smile on the face, experience something that has been on their so-called bucket list. So give folks a few examples just to wet their whistle.
Oh, it's beautiful. There's the creativity of the wish knows no bounds, just like a child's imagination. And we really want to try and figure out what that child really thinks is magical. And like you said, some of our children will pass away, but many of our children, the wish is what actually gives them the strength to persevere through their illness and live on to live full lives. We've granted beautiful wishes like a bedroom makeover. Sometimes a kid wants a puppy. Sometimes we've actually had a child who asked for a chicken coop, and we built a magical chicken coop that included a swing and a teeter-totter and some pet chickens for them. So just like I said, the creativity of a wish knows no bounds, and we just think it's really amazing to be able to offer this force of positive in the life of that child and their family when they're going through something so difficult as critical illness. It's devastating, but the wishes really gives a child and their family the strength to persevere through these challenges.
I think it's brilliant. We've done lots of work with Make-A-Wish here in the province over the years, so soft spot in my heart for it. How does the formal fundraising work? Or do you just set up shop outside of some retail outlet, for instance, in Deer Lake or anywhere else, and hope that people drop by, or are there other opportunities for people to give?
Yep, there's lots of ways. So there's actually different groups across the province that have been fundraising all year. Tonight, we're actually headed out to Woody Point to see that incredible community of supporters there led by Sharon Chalk. They've been fundraising all year, and so we're going to have dinner at the Legion with them tonight. We are set up all across the province. Today, we're in Deer Lake, over to Woody Point, and then heading to Springdale tomorrow. But you can also go online and make a gift if you like to. You can support the Run the Rock crew by going to makeawish.ca/Run the Rock. And you can also follow along with updates on the crew as they traverse this beautiful province over the next week, landing in St. John's 1 week from today.
Have you been to the province before, Megan?
I certainly have, and I love coming every time I can.
Well, welcome back to the province, and good luck with the fundraising efforts. And, certainly hearty congratulations to the 16 members of the HMCS St. John's, because, they are the face of this. As much as we're trying to make it about Make-A-Wish, for them to put forward themselves for this 900-kilometre run across the island and their presence at the fundraising events. I know it's a partnership, but bravo to all hands and congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you so much. It is a beautiful partnership. It's been going for 29 years. We want to see it go for many, many years. And we're just grateful to every single community member across the country or across the province who's helping us make this fundraising program a success.
And let's hope that we can obliterate last year's record of 132,000.
That's our plan. That's our plan, Patty. Thanks so much for your help.
My pleasure. Thanks for the call.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Megan Stovall-McKnight, the CEO of Make-A-Wish Canada. Let's go to line number 3. Robert Hunt, you're on the air.
Good morning, Pat.
Good morning to you.
I just want to let people know about my new book that's coming out. Or I should say that's already out.
Am I speaking with the Robert Hunt behind Townies and Corner Boys and Brazil Street, that kind of stuff?
The one and only.
There you go. Welcome back to the show, Robert.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I put out a book a few weeks ago. It's a story about my father. It's called Torpedoed. It's a story about my father being torpedoed, of course, during World War II, having to spend 5 days on a raft with 24 other men, 2 rafts, I should say, and rowing 35 miles to Nova Scotia in all kinds of inclement weather.
So he was torpedoed on, and he was on what vessel?
He was on SS Kitty's Brook. It was owned by Ballwaters during the war. They allowed 4 ships to be loaned out to the Merchant Navy, Merchant Marine, and my father, of course, was on one of them. He worked with the SS Glencoe for years, and of course, all these men volunteered, brave souls they were, and my father ended up on SS Kitty's Brook, was torpedoed 2 days after leaving St. John's.
Do you have first-hand accounts of the 35 that were in the rafts, or is this, based on historical issue, just a fictional recount, or how does the book read?
I don't know. It's a true story. True story about my father and the men aboard the ship. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the names of. There were 34 people aboard. There was 9 names I could not find. I had the names of the other 24 and the 9 men who died when she was torpedoed. We were doing research, of course, a lot of research. It took me 4 years to write this book. I tried. I hope I don't slight anybody by not mentioning their name if they were on this ship. But when you're trying to accumulate names, sometimes you're very lucky, and I was. I had a lot of people that helped me out and gave me names. I had people that emailed me and said, my father was aboard that boat, blah, blah, blah. So I was very lucky in that respect.
Yeah, good for you. And so just a very quick question, maybe not necessarily what Torpedoed is about, but what became of your father?
My father, of course, CN owned not only the coastal boats, but they owned the railway. So my father, when he came back from the war, he was hit. He was unconscious in the water. I even found out the name of the man who saved his life. I was talking to his family. I found out the German captain that torpedoed the submarine, found out all about him and what happened. And when he was in the water, of course, he was unconscious, and he was saved by another gentleman, a man, Harold Richards from Port-au-Basque. So all these accounts and what I found out are as accurate as I could get them. There's some of the things I couldn't find out naturally, but it's probably 99% accurate.
A good on you for taking it on, and I don't know how many books you got out there, probably half dozen or so.
Yeah, I think this is my 9th.
It's good for you, Robert. I appreciate making time. I suppose people can get this book wherever they get their books.
No, it's not into the bookstores yet because it only came out 2 weeks ago. But if people want to contact me, I'll give you my cell number, 691-4348, and or, of course, I'm on Facebook, and or all lowercase, Bob Hunt 99 at yahoo.ca.
Bob Hunt 99 at yahoo.ca. Is that because you're a Gretzky fan?
Yes, it is. Actually, I'm a Red Wing fan, but Wayne Gretzky was always my favorite hockey player.
Fabulous stuff. Good to have you on the show. Good luck with the book, Robert.
Thanks very much, Pat. You have a great day.
You too, sir. Bye-bye. All right, there we go.
Bye.
Final break of the day. Do not go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 6. Good morning to the Ward 4 Councillor of City of St. John's. It's Tom Davis. Tom, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning.
Mun Hope did another cleanup last Sunday and on the Elizabeth Avenue area, and they're doing one this Sunday. Roebuck Lane areas meet at Sobeys 1 o'clock on Sunday for those who are interested. An issue that's come across my bow a couple of times and really came to a head this weekend was it's dogs off leash. I know there's been some pretty serious instances over the years. Around Kittyville Lake, there was a serious incident. There's constant incidents up in the 3 pond barrens up in Pigby Park. But on over the weekend, I had a resident reach out to me on the trails around the Geo Center. Apparently, the dog up there has a thing for hats. And the dog, the first time she encountered it, jumped up and took it off her head. And this time she held on to it, saw the dog coming, and it almost knocked her over trying to pull it out of her hand. So, the city has bylaws. You're not supposed to have your dogs off leash. And people who do it need to realize that even if you know your dog is friendly, you have no idea the fear that residents experience. So it's not about you. It's not about your dog. It's about the other people. And, again, it's against the law. And I'm going to be working with my council and the staff here to attempt to get some enforcement and really send a message to people. We have the dog parks. That's why we have them, for your dogs to be off leash. But people, when you're out walking your dogs on the trails of the city, keep them on leash, for heaven's sakes.
Yep. The problem, like most things, laws and bylaws and regulations are fine on paper, but until people hear stories of fines being levied for dogs off leash, nothing changes. People don't care. If you're up running around on the old golf course at Ballyhaley and or you're up around 3 Pound Barrens, which is a very commonplace area to see dogs off leash, no one does anything about it, and consequently nobody worries about it.
Well, that's a mission I'm bringing to the table today, so hopefully we'll get some progress there. Along the same lines, break-ins in neighborhoods, getting a lot of complaints from people. And I encourage people, the Neighborhood Watch program, which I'm going to put some information on about, residents coming together, utilizing cameras in the neighborhood, utilizing more eyes on the street, hopefully to deter some of the break-ins that are occurring, because it's terrorizing people, especially seniors and people with families. Again, I know, unfortunately, most likely the people who are doing it aren't listening to this show, so the message is probably not getting to them. But prevention through Neighborhood Watch and getting to know your neighbors and having cameras and all these things, and not being afraid to report it to the police, because sometimes, even though the police are busy, you never know when you can be that next piece in the puzzle that gets that individual or individuals off the streets.
Yeah. There's always a surge of these types of property crimes in the summer. For what reason and what's the correlation there, I'm not entirely sure, but we hear it all the time.
Another thing, just building on my call from last week, Public Mobile, I did some more research, had some calls from residents actually inquiring about what I was talking about, but Public actually has a $19 a month unlimited Canada-wide calling and texting plus 3 gigabytes of data. So again, I implore people, if you can get a hold of a used phone, or if you own your phone, it's a great way to reduce your overall spending during the month and during the year.
Yeah. Well, I guess not remarkably, after you made that comment last week, we had a rush of 6 or 10 people in the matter of 30 seconds look for the name of the company. So there you go.
Yeah, well, everything we can do to help. I want to get around to climate change. And, St. John's just experienced, it's the average for June in St. John's is 91.7 millimeters. Previous record was 199 millimeters, and that's since 1891. And June 2024, we had 215 millimeters, which is 8% more than our all-time record, which is significant. Climate change models predict that Newfoundland will have more rainfall, while other parts of the country will predict it have less. In the past 12 months, the average were 1.64 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And in each month from July 23 till 24, June 24 has been the hottest on record for that month. The challenge, unfortunately, is that we're seeing an acceleration. And with warming comes more evaporation. Also transpiration, which is where the vegetation loses water. Now, that leads to drier forests and brush. And of course, an increased forest fire risk, which we saw last year really badly, and obviously Newfoundland's been touched with this year. More moisture in the atmosphere, which is a result of this evaporation and transpiration, leads to more extreme rainfalls and flooding, more fuel for hurricanes and cyclones, more powerful storms. And then, of course, the heating also is warming up our oceans. And water, when it gets warmer, it expands. Therefore, that increases sea level rise. And also it feeds the storms, the hurricanes. In 2015, the chance that you'd have a hurricane rapidly increase. The chance that you'd have, two different things. The chance that you'd have over 1.5 degree day a year was 0% in 2015. Between 2024 and 28 now, there's an 80% chance that the temperature will be on average over 1.5 degrees. And the challenge with all that stuff is we worry about climate tipping points, things that are like permanent changes, like melting permafrost up in the Arctic, or ocean currents, major ocean currents like the Atlantic Meridional overturning circulation, which is the Gulf Stream, the Labrador Current, all interacting in the Atlantic Ocean, for example. So last week when I called and I wanted to talk about Hurricane Beryl because it was just getting started, but I didn't get to it. But Hurricane Beryl has broken all these records. It's the most easterly forming hurricane ever, so it formed the most easterly. It's the earliest Cat 4 hurricane ever, the first time it ever happened in June. It's also the earliest Cat 5 hurricane. And like Cat 5, Cat 4, what does that mean? Well, Category 5 is the highest category we have for storms, over like 260 kilometers an hour. And a lot of people, we can't comprehend it. We get 140, 150 really bad northeasters or tropical storms, and it does damage. You'll see siding off and roofs damaged. But if you see the models of what happens with modern homes in Category 5, it just wipes them off face the earth. You just get left with foundations. And so, the new word now, of course, with all these magical words, atmospheric river and all these words, now the new one now is rapid intensification. And that's when basically a storm very quickly increases like really fast. And Beryl went from a tropical storm to a Category 4 in 24 hours, and then it went on to become a Category 5. And the water temperatures in the Atlantic right now are what they would normally be in August or September. And the scary thing with all that means that hurricanes don't care what time of year it is. Generally, the warmer the water is, the more easily they form. And then, of course, also we get this rapid intensification. And in case of Beryl, it went from 50 kilometers to over 200 kilometers in 2 days. And it intensified faster than any other hurricane has before September month. And unfortunately, the rapid intensification, like what happened last year, some people may or may not register. Hurricane Otis last year was forecasted just to be a tropical storm. It was approaching Mexico. And then overnight, it went to a Category 4 in 12 hours. And then it went on to be a Category 5, and it basically wiped up Acapulco. If you look up Hurricane Otis, Acapulco, it literally just flattened a modern city. The president at the time actually couldn't get to Acapulco. They tried to go there in like special military vehicles because it was too windy still to fly, and they couldn't make it because the damage to the highways and stuff. So because you don't have a lot of warning, like in Grenadine, in the island, 90% of the homes were either severely damaged or they were totally destroyed. And Curacao had 260 km/h winds, which like the president said, just complete destruction. And, all that stuff is just, people hear that and they're like, either like, oh my goodness, that's really scary. And they put their heads in the sand, or it's like, oh, it's not my problem. It's not going to affect me up there. And they go on with their lives. And I understand all that, but as like mature adults and as people who should care about the future, whether it's your own future or your children, grandchildren, or other people's children and grandchildren. For me, it's like the message is, if there was a guy up on a mountain with a staff and said, I'm just going to keep throwing plagues at you guys and bad things at you to listen, will we listen? I don't know. Like the scientists are trying to do that.
I think I know where you're going with it, Tom, but we've cleared 12 noon, so we'll have to leave it there for today.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. Bye.
All right, we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on Big Land FM and VOCM's Openline. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.